Welcome to Amintro Family, the podcast. I'm your host, Jeff Sammut. We hope you're enjoying the free online platform and community for family caregivers, be it through the Amintro Family app or amintrofamily.com. It's all about helping those caring for their aging parents and relatives or friends and to connect and share experiences and access valuable resources. Our guest is the founder and owner of 718 Studios, director and senior producer of the PBS film Caregiving, of which Oscar-nominated actor Bradley Cooper serves as an executive producer. Award-winning actor Uzo Aduba serves as narrator. It's available on pbs.org and the PBS app. Two-time Emmy and Peabody Award-winning documentary filmmaker Chris Durrance joining us. Chris, it's great to have you on the show. Thank you for this.
Jeff, thank you so much. It's great to be with you.
Well, we appreciate having you. And your film, boy, it tells the stories of 6 family and professional caregivers in the U.S., and in doing so, shining a light on caregiving in the U.S. and the challenges that caregivers, both unpaid and professional, that they face. And I'll bet every family in Canada and the U.S. is caregiving to varying degrees. What sense of urgency did you feel was present in even deciding to make this film?
Well, as any family that's involved in this is going to know, we're in a caregiving crisis. But it's a hidden crisis because there's so little debate about this in our capitals. And if you're going out to Canada as well, then people there will know that just as well as in the US. But you go down any street and behind the doors there'll be caregiving done at a rate that outside those homes people would just have no idea about. There'll be people dealing with spouses, with parents, with grandparents, with a child with disabilities. And they're doing this to a large extent unpaid, unsupported in their workplace, unsupported in many cases by other family members, unsupported by friends, because it's hard to talk about. It's really hard to talk about. It's as if we don't have this social acceptance that we can talk about it, and so people end up suffering in silence.
A big reason why this show exists, and if one hasn't been a caregiver, they will be, and care has become a political issue, even though care and caregiving affects everybody.
Caregiving will affect, as you said, every single one of us. I mean, frankly, we're either going to need care or be providing care, and in most cases, both. It is, and frankly, it's caregiving that keeps the whole economy going. Without this, the value of the unpaid care, just talking about the United States of America, is nearly $1 trillion. I don't have the exact figures, but it is a huge amount of work that is being provided free of charge by these families, and that enables the rest of us to work and to keep the economy going. It's time we think of a new approach, come up with a new approach to caregiving.
I wanted to bring up the economical side just for a moment, because it's said in the film that a care crisis is also an economic crisis, something that you brushed on there, and vice versa. How did your master's degree in economics help to tell the stories that you did in caregiving? It's quite an asset to have. It's quite a tool to have in your tool belt.
It's been a long time since anyone has brought that up, but thanks for doing that research. To me, it's what I was trying to do when I was doing that master's in economics was trying to understand how the world works. And what I gradually realized over the course of my filmmaking career is that ultimately it all comes down to humans. I mean, we are the sum of what we do as individuals and as families, as members of communities, as members of society. That is what economics is all about. It's not so much about data. It's not so much about the dollar value of things. And caregiving has been one of those things that I think has eluded or has not got the attention that it deserves, because it defies simple data collection. It defies the dollars and cents that drive so much of decision making in our state capitals, in our businesses, and in the case of the United States, in Washington, D.C. But caregiving is that's almost the problem of the data rather than the problem of caregiving. Doesn't mean we should set caregiving aside. It means we should be making added effort to try and figure out how we account for caregiving, how we support caregivers, how we support families that are in crisis. And it's millions and millions of families in the States. It's probably a third of families at any one time. I mean, this is not just some marginal issue. This is central to the functioning, to the health, to the well-being, to the happiness of basically a third of the country.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And we're going to talk a bit of numbers, and we're obviously going to get into the film. But just as an aside, I have to ask, did your pursuit and your knowledge now of economics, and you say you did that to better understand the world, did you do that with a purpose to help in storytelling, in telling stories as a filmmaker, or would that have been something that would have come along after in your career?
I was always interested in storytelling, and what I was trying to do was understand what was the fundamental forces in societies that were driving decisions. Why certain societies looked a certain way? Like, why does America look a certain way? Why do European countries? Why does Latin America, South America? Why are their societies built differently? And that's the kind of thing I was trying to understand. And economics took me part of the way there, but only part of the way there. It's actually through this filmmaking, through this storytelling, through being with people and being at their side as they go through their own lived experience that has helped me become not only a better filmmaker, a better storyteller, but also, I hope, a better person. So a better person in my own family, a better person at my workplace, a better person in my community.
Well, I think it speaks to the kind of person that you are as a documentary filmmaker, that you would get people to open up to you and tell their stories. And I'm so glad you did for the purpose of this film, Caregiving. Again, it's a PBS film that you can see on pbs.org and the PBS app. So with this film, and I'm curious with the people that you would have spoken to, and it's a very diverse group of people in many different ways, but especially in terms of why and how they've become caregivers. What did it take for you, and maybe there are varying degrees of effort, but what did it take for you to, one, make the choices you did in telling their stories and whose stories you would tell, but also in getting them to tell your stories or to tell their stories?
I want to say just a couple of things on that, because that's a great question and it gets to the heart of this film. The first thing that is that, to you in the audience that are listening, you're going to hear just my voice, but this is a team effort. We had a large team of really just fantastic collaborators working on this. And I want to give them a shout out, because much of what, for people who've seen the film, much of what you see in the film, there's a 2-hour film, but also we did 18 short films, additional stories from around the country. So a large part of what you see and that what you've enjoyed and what has resonated with you is the product of not just me, but all of my fantastic colleagues on the project. So that's the first thing I wanted to say.
Yeah, and I want to interject quickly by saying those 18 short films are available on wellbeings.org. I want to make sure people check that out. I'll remind everybody later, but I want to make sure people check that out. Go ahead.
Thanks,
Chris.
Jeff.
Yeah.
And what we wanted to do when we set out was we wanted to challenge people. We wanted them to think about caregiving in fresh ways. I think when you say the word, for many people, and certainly for me going into this project, I would picture in my mind a family, generally an elder couple, one spouse looking after the other. And that is very common.
Yep. And
these people deserve recognition and support. But what we wanted to do was show people that there's a lot more to caregiving than that. So we showed younger families dealing with it. We show children who are acting as caregivers. We show children needing intense care beyond the kind of regular childcare that anyone who's brought up a family might associate with caregiving. We also wanted to take people into settings that weren't the home. So we show caregiving through music and we told the story of a chorus that focuses on people with dementia and their caregivers. We did a piece about caregiving through dance. We did a story about a church that is designed for caregivers and their families in Ohio. So we wanted to take people into places that they wouldn't necessarily think about. Another one I'm really proud of is a story of a school in Rhode Island. If we get onto caregiving youth, we can talk a bit more about that. So all this to say that a large part of what we were doing throughout this project, and it was probably a 3-year project, all told, was to take people to places that they didn't necessarily associate with caregiving, where they didn't necessarily think that they would be finding caregiving. And we hope that opens people's eyes to the fact that it is all around us. It's everywhere.
It is, and it really is highlighted, I'm sure, in the 18 short films as well. Well, it does, but with the main film as well, Caregiving, because you meet just a wide variety of people, caregiving in very different ways. There's a husband/father, Matthew, out of New York. All of a sudden, he has to become a primary caregiver, and he's doing everything, and it's a full-time job, and he has to quit his job. He professionally, he can't move on anymore because he's got to make sure that he's taking care of his young child and of course his wife who's gotten sick. We meet a 14-year-old kid who's having to, in part, take care of his mother, thrust into a position like she talked about him being like a 40-year-old in a 14-year-old kid's body. And we really get to know these people and the young. I mean, we mentioned the 14-year-old. You mentioned him first, and I mentioned him just now. Is it the young caregivers, the young people in this film whose stories resonated the most with you? Because it's talked about in the film, about 5.4 million children and adolescents in the U.S. are direct caregivers, and most are not identified as much or as such by their schools. Was it their stories that really resonated the most for you?
Going in, I had no idea that there was an army of kids under 18 who are dealing with profound caregiving needs and part of the caregiving teams in their families. No idea. And I have to say, you cited the 5.4. We used that 5.4 million. We used that in the film. Since then, my sense is that the number is that's an undercount. And I think of a rule of thumb, it's probably around 10 million. And by and large, these are kids in middle school. These are kids in high school. So if any of you have kids or have grandkids who are in school, just picture that in your kids' class of, say, 20 other students or 30 other students, there may be a third to a half of those kids who are actively caregiving. They may be looking after a younger sibling. Because a parent is sick or has needs, that they may be looking after a grandparent. They may, in Jacob's case, be looking after their mother. And these are, like, if we think of caregivers as this hidden army that keeps the country going, these kids are the hidden battalion of this hidden army. And one of my great sort of revelations, at least personally to me in the making of this film, was not so much to be thinking about these kids as victims. They're the most wonderful and special people that you will ever meet, but they need help. They're going, imagine a teenager. Like, what teenager is going to confess to being a caregiver, and that's why they're late, or that's why they have to cut out school early, or that's why they have to do DoorDash in the evening to earn money to help pay for medical bills, or that's why they just flunk and don't graduate at all. And so my hope is that one of the many things that might come out of a project like this is that we start having a conversation about this and about other issues. But in this case, it doesn't require DC. We all know what's happening in Washington, DC, but it doesn't require that. It's pretty simple. Rhode Island is the first state to do anything about this. And what they did was they just did a survey. they asked their student bodies in middle schools and high schools, I believe, they said, are you a caregiver? And drilled down a bit on that. And in some schools, they found it wasn't an issue, and so they didn't have to do anything. In others, they found it was 40% of their student body. And so over a few years, I mean, that is a huge number. Yeah. And so over a few years, they started making plans for that so that the administration knew, so that teachers appreciated. So maybe you could do flexible schedules. Maybe you could do other things that would support these kids, provide, in school therapy or group sessions. I mean, there's so many creative ways of dealing with this. But if you don't know that it's happening, if you don't even ask the question, these kids are just gonna fall through the cracks. And like I said, these are the kids who should be honored and should be venerated, because they are multitasking. They are wise beyond their years. They are taking things on emotionally. They're going to be just the most wonderful, empathetic members of society. And they just need a little bit of support through that, few years of middle school and high school to get them on their way, rather than get pushed off a cliff.
Chris, they're very important. They're going to be taking care of us. So we have to do everything we can to recognize them. And with your film, with this show, to normalize the conversation of caregiving for young people, because they might find that they have way more in common with other kids in their school than they would ever believe.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's so well put. And another place where I think that we need to have this conversation, I love the word normalize. I think that's spot on, Jeff. To normalize this is in the workplace. I mean, for most of you that, whether you're retired and so you were working at a company for many years, or if you're still working or have family members in a major corporation, you'll know that they all have childcare policies. Basically, everyone has a childcare policy, but a vanishingly small number have a care policy. And so it just makes it really hard to normalize the needs that every family has to get a parent, to get a spouse, to get someone to a doctor's appointment, to have, to get them to PT. And so starting those conversations in workplaces, I think, can be hugely, hugely valuable. And those corporations that do it, they reap enormous benefits from doing it. They have a much more, they have better retention, they have better morale, they have better productivity. So everyone who does it wins. But they just need that little bit of encouragement, and it should come from within. It's something that does not need to come from Washington, D.C. So reach out to your HR department, or reach out, encourage family members to reach out to their HR departments and just ask the question, do you have a care policy? I'll tell you a story. I'm sorry I'm going on a little bit long about this, but this film, Caregiving, was overseen by WETA, which is the DC PBS station. So the PBS station in Washington, DC. They do all of Ken Burns' films and PBS NewsHour and many other great things. They realized about halfway through the making of this film that they themselves didn't have a care policy. They just had a childcare policy. So they changed their own rules. And so now their employees have care benefits. And if they don't use them at the end of the year, they can gift them to a fellow employee.
Amazing. Great
very
idea.
Simple thing.
Yeah.
And a very simple idea. And if 1,000 companies did that, if your listeners were able to get even one company to do that, you've just changed the lives of thousands of families going forward over the years to come.
That's right. And
simple things can make a huge difference.
And if I'm a company, if I'm a person that is looking to hire somebody and I find that somebody is a caregiver, I'm investing in them. I want them working for me. They're good workers. They care. They're empathetic. They're going to be good coworkers as well. There's a lot of qualities that a caregiver would bring. So whatever they might need in terms of help with the care that they need to provide, I'm doing it because I want them on my payroll.
They're also great multitaskers. They're crisis managers.
Yes.
They are resourceful and resilient. I mean, they're exactly the kinds of people that the employers should be falling over themselves to bring in bring on board.
Another great thing that you do with this film is take us through the history in the U.S. in terms of care, and it's a good thing that you mentioned that. Hey, U.S. Caregivers don't necessarily need to rely on a DC to help them with their caregiving duties, because you go way back with American history of caregiving, going back to the Great Depression and up to the Great Recession and to COVID. It just seems that a reoccurring theme, and not to be a downer, because there is hope coming out of this film, but it seems that Americans who needed help the most were being brushed aside, and that seems to be a common theme throughout history.
I'm so glad you brought up the history, Jeff, because to me, like, one of the, if there's a contribution that we've made to the conversation around caregiving, I really feel like it lies in particular in this history. Because, and why do I say that? To me, the caregiving is invisible today, but it's always been invisible. And if we're to have any hope in writing a fresh new chapter in our caregiving story going forwards that helps all Americans, we really want to know our past. We really want to be able to draw from the lessons of the past. And to me, it's not a dark history, but it's a vivid history. It's a vibrant history. It's a history full of heroes and advances, and yes, some setbacks. But it's a really, really rich history, and it's a history that deserves to be better known. And just to take a couple of examples, for example, when we learn our history in middle school and high school, we learn about great leaders, the presidents, we learn about the wars, we learn about the Civil War, we learn about the Second World War, we learn about Vietnam. But what we don't do is ever think about these moments in history through a caregiving lens. The Second World War, for example, most people don't know this, that started the revolution in childcare, in families being able to get the support that they needed to raise their children. It took several decades, but it all starts out of the Second World War and Rosie the Riveter. Because Rosie the Riveter goes into factories, but then the government really realizes pretty quickly that many of the Rosie the Riveters have kids and that those kids need childcare. And so they built childcare facilities near the factories and near the workers who needed that care. That then becomes a national childcare policy that we talked about earlier, that so many corporations have. Vietnam. People think about Vietnam. They have, different people have different views on that war. But I bet very, very few in your audience will realize that Vietnam is the birth of the disabilities rights movement. Well, there's an important, not the birth, that the Vietnam War is an important moment in the disabilities rights movement. And that leads directly to the Americans with Disabilities Act that President George H.W. Bush signs years later. That leads, any sidewalk that you go onto in pretty much any major town and city in this country probably has a curb cut. Every garage, every driveway has a curb cut. Why is that? That comes out of, in public spaces, that comes out of the ADA. And is transformational, not just for people with disabilities, but for anyone with a stroller, with a young kid, for anyone with heavy bags and needs to get up a ramp, for anyone with a bicycle. I mean, for just so many people benefit from just one, that's just one simple thing that came out of it, directly emerged from the Vietnam War. So this is a history I really hope people lean into and learn from, as we think about what we want to build for ourselves going forward.
Well, and that's a couple of reasons there why I walked away from the film feeling hopeful that even through the tragedy of war come these policies and practices that are so common today that we might take for granted that have been implemented out of that. I'm encouraged and hopeful in seeing men propping up women to take care of policy and to give a voice, because there have been examples of that. A big one that you would highlight in the film. There are people, and we're seeing it with caregivers, and we see it every day. We don't recognize it the way you do in the film, but we see people stepping up when there is need within their family or within their core group of friends, whatever it might be from a caregiving standpoint. There are going to be people that step up generation after generation. And I think that was a big reason why I walked away feeling hopeful after the film. But for you as the filmmaker, what gave you the most hope after having made this film in terms of caregiving?
That's a really great question. I mean, to me, what gives me the most hope is frankly, it's the sharing of the stories that I hope comes out of this film. I hope that I feel like for many people, that normalization that we've talked about isn't in the air we breathe and in the water we drink quite enough. But what gives me hope is that when people do feel empowered, when people do feel inspired to share their stories, great things happen. Things happen within families when they start talking about care and preparing for the future that is inevitable. Great things happen in workplaces when people start talking about it. Great things happen in schools when people start talking about it. Great things happen in communities when people start talking about it, when they start thinking about our infrastructure with care in mind, and the baby boomer population that is retiring at a rate that we have not seen forever in the history of this country. I mean, we are going to have to move. We are going to have to adapt, and Washington, D.C. may be a bit of a laggard in this, but there's a lot that all of us can do. And I think it starts with a simple act of sharing a story, because in doing that yourself, you encourage others to do that. We realize that we are this huge army, and that it also just generates ideas. It generates ideas that are going to work in particular families, in particular workplaces, and in particular communities. So the act of sharing is what I hope comes out of the film, and that act of sharing is also what gives me the most hope.
Yeah, I think this film is an education for many, certainly, but for those that are in it, for those that are caregivers, for anybody that's listening right now that's saying, hey, I want to check out this film, here's another big reason why you want to check out this film, because I know, having been a caregiver, I still am, but I felt seen minutes into the film, minutes into it. I'll give this little thing away, but I don't want to give everything away in film, because I want people to watch it the way I did, going in with open eyes and not knowing much about it. Bradley Cooper talks at the very beginning of the film about idolizing his dad, like many of us would, and dressing like him and wanting to be like him. And then fast forward to Bradley well into his adulthood, and his father is very sick, and he's helping to bathe his dad, and how that can be such a traumatic experience. And right from the get-go, I just felt, again, that having been through it, the same thing, a similar story, I felt really seen. Like, oh my God, like we all think that our stories are so unique. And maybe at times, and maybe I'm just speaking for myself, you feel sorry for yourself. And then you hear others and go, wow, other people have stories. And with all due respect, I mean, Chris, you're used to being around the Hollywood elite. Bradley Cooper is a very, very well-known celebrity, a very well-known and accomplished actor. To hear that he was bathing his dad and caring for his dad the way all of us would, really, it was heartwarming. It felt good. And I didn't think I'd see something where Bradley Cooper, with all due respect to him, would make me feel seen the way he did.
Yeah, that's well put. I mean, I think that when I hear him talk about it, I mean, he moves, as you said, very successful career, family's born and brought up in Philadelphia, made a life for himself in LA, but his dad falls sick and he moves back into his childhood home. He moves back into the childhood bedroom in his childhood home. And then he is part of the team taking care of his dad. And to me, firstly, what he experiences is what we all experience. It is a universal experience. What impresses me about him is he could easily have gone back to his life, but he decided to try and make a difference in a way that he could, which is shining a light on it, which is building a foundation to support to support caregivers, which is being active in its community, particularly in Philadelphia, which is doing work now with veterans groups. So that to me is an example of someone who has not only gone through that experience, but with the means and the wherewithal to help others, has set about doing that in an inexpensive way. And so my, gratitude is pretty boundless when it comes to Bradley and what he's done to shine a light on this important issue. I mean, it's not a glamorous issue. He did not have to do this, but we're so grateful that he did.
Yeah. Oh, very. Chris, very late into the conversation for me to ask this, but I'll ask anyway. Was this film personal to you in that you have been a caregiver before?
Funny that you asked that, because for me, I went in with a very different mindset. I went into the project with the group behind the film because we'd worked together on other projects. We'd done a major series on cancer. We had done a major series on genetics, which was about rare genetic disease. So I had done a lot in that space. What we collectively realized is that in focusing on disease, in focusing on patients, in focusing on cutting edge medical research, all very important, worthwhile stories, what we hadn't done is highlight that possibly most important person in the room, which was the caregiver. And so we set out to change that. And then on the course of this journey, and like I said, this was around 3 years of work, it dawned on me. And so I feel like I am like many, many people in this country and many, many people across the world who don't identify as caregivers, but are doing that work. And one of the things I hope that happens out of this project is not only that people are encouraged to share their story, but realize that they are caregivers, realize that what they're doing is important. What they're doing is valuable. What they're doing, yes, it's really tough, and yes, it can be super rewarding, but it's part of what we're all doing. It's part of life. It's part of our society. It's part of the public good, and that they should very much feel not like an individual, but very much feel part of a team that is doing that. And I think in those numbers will come strength. In those numbers will come policy changes, because an army of 100 million, upwards of 100 million people can't be ignored.
Chris, as an artist, be it with film, music, the written word, what have you, you'll do your work and then you put it out into the world, and then it belongs to all of us. So we have this film, and we have this film to draw from and to take from it what we may. But for you personally, as a filmmaker, as a documentary filmmaker, to go in, this isn't the first time you've done this, but to go in and to tell very personal stories and to capture them on film. What does it mean to you to do that for those that are in the film that are still around? I'm thinking of those people that are in the film that could look back at this time of their lives and maybe remember those that they've lost. What does it mean to you that you've done that for them specifically?
I have to say, this has been the most meaningful project that I've ever been involved in, and meaningful in a couple of ways. First is what you've been talking about, which is these relationships are indelible. We go on a journey together, the team and I, it's not just me, again, this is the team and I go on this journey together. We become very close to people, and sadly life often intervenes, and families face horrible tragedies and moments that we wouldn't wish on anyone, and we're by their side as they go through that. But I think for us and for them, there is also a greater purpose to this. It's not just the filmmaking, it's not just the telling of the story. To us, to all of us, I think, the film is there to bring people together. And our hope is that it will continue to do that, and it will bring people together to start conversations, to think about what the future will look like. because it's on us to write this future. It really is. It's not on other people. It's not on politicians. It's not on judges. It's not on administrators and civil servants to do it. It's on us to write the future that we want. And that starts with recognizing it in ourselves, encouraging others, sharing our stories, and then encouraging others to do it. And then as we gather, and I hope that the film brings people together across the country to do that, to start thinking of ideas for the future. So that, to me, is what this is all about.
Well, and the conversation the experience doesn't have to end with the film. The conversation continues. There's a national engagement campaign tied to this film. How can we all take part in this project as well?
So on wellbeings.org, there are many resources. You can not only see the films, but avail yourselves of information about caregiving. And then there's also a story wall, and I encourage people to submit their own stories. Tens of thousands of people have already done so. And I think that's called We Are Wellbeing Story Wall, but maybe you can put it up in the show notes or something, yes, or announce it in the bumper at the end, because I'm not entirely sure, to be honest, not entirely sure of that. But just encourage people to start these conversations. And then, as we talked about earlier, do that in your workplace, do that in the schools. And if you're retired, encourage family members to do the same. And then start the conversations within your family. And I hope this grows and grows and grows into a movement that gives us the caregiving support, the caregiving safety net, the caregiving society that we all know we want.
Hashtag share your caregiving story. The film is called Caregiving, which can be found on pbs.org and the PBS app. And Chris and his team, again, made 18 short films on caregiving as part of the project. You could check them out on wellbeings.org. Director, senior producer, Chris Durrance. Chris, what a pleasure having you on the show. Really appreciate your taking the time, and more than that, making this film and pushing along the conversation about caregiving. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Jeff. That was great.
Thank you. There's Chris Durrance. I'm Jeff Sammut. This has been another episode of Amintro Family, the podcast, which you can hear on the Amintro Family app and wherever you listen to podcasts. We've got a new episode dropping every 2 weeks. You can check out amintrofamily.com. And a reminder, we want to hear your stories on the forum, and we can share them here as well on Amintro Family, the podcast.